thank you once again for joining us here on PM Express. Tonight, there is only one thing to discuss. It broke on the same show last night with the Agyapa Royalties deal. This on the back of the Special Prosecutor's risk assessment, corruption risk assessment. And whilst the show was going on, the president also reacted with a detailed statement on what he planned to do. And that's why tonight, looking at the Agyapa, again, the Special Prosecutor's verdict. So if you haven't heard already, let me go through for you some of the key findings in the Special Prosecutor's report. The Special Prosecutor has found that the involvement of the armourer, and this is the transaction advisor, they came to form a partnership with a local partner in Databank and made, according to the Special Prosecutor, made the deal an international business or an economic transaction that needed approval from Parliament. And as far as the Special Prosecutor is concerned, this did not happen. And what else did he find? The Special Prosecutor also found that the mandate agreement does not indicate when and how the fees quoted in US dollars will be paid by Amara to its decoy data bank. And this is a very strong word that the Special Prosecutor chooses to use instead of their local partner. He chooses to use the word decoy, a strong one. We'll get into that shortly. Now, the Special Prosecutor added that the Finance Ministry eluded the approval of the Public Procurement Authority, stated in the Public Procurement Authority Act. And so that for the Special Prosecutor was key in terms of regularizing that process that led to the selection of the armourer. Now, he also points out that the suspicion of bid rigging, right? And this has been a major word that had popped up throughout the in the document. It sort of is one of the key findings, that there was this reasonable suspicion of bid rigging in the deal, and that there was corruption activity also, including the potential for illicit financial flows and money laundering as well, which he believes that was there potentially in the document that Parliament had approved. So what was the President's own reaction? There are a few more details that when we're going to discuss, including what he found, for example, about the Deputy Finance Minister, who he believed had signed on to some documents without authority. He also found or established in his analysis, risk analysis, the issues surrounding cronyism and nepotism regarding some of the key issues relating to the Agyapa Royalties deal. Now, the President has reacted in the back of this particular report, and he's directed that the minister, the Finance Minister, by the way, to resubmit the documents to Parliament for the approval process to start all over again. This is a central controversial matter. In fact, the chairman of the Finance Committee in Parliament, Dr. Makasibe Ibua, who will join us, had agreed to be here in person, but says that he can only do it on phone, will join us nonetheless. His position is that the Agyapa Royalties deal is done, it's closed, there's nothing they can do about it. And that if this is what the presidency is suggesting, then it must come in a fresh form. There must be some fresh detail. It couldn't necessarily be the same old Agyapa deal that is being resubmitted. He believes the processes in Parliament doesn't allow that. We'll get the minority's view on this when we speak to Mr. Adongo on this matter, what he makes of this all-important directive from the President to the Finance Minister. The President also has directed that the procurement of the services of the transaction advisors should also be reviewed, and this is directed to the Finance Minister to do also as part of the curing some of the key issues that had emerged. Now, he also expects the Finance Minister and the Mineral Investment Fund and the transaction advisors themselves to use the opportunity now, because this is going to start afresh, to amend the relevant agreements, taking into consideration useful feedback and feedback that minority had given, civil society had given. We've seen chiefs, even the National House of Chiefs issued a statement on this controversially. The President says include all that. But one of the key things that had also come up is when should this happen? Because remember, we are just 34 days to major elections. Do you want to have all this now? The president proposes two possible alternatives. One is that do it after the elections. The life of this parliament is still very alive after the elections on December 7th. I mean, 3 days maximum after December 7th, we'll know who had won. The president says you can have that debate and settle this right after that. The second option is that you do this after we swear in the new government on January 7th. It can also go back, but this will go back to the new parliament, right? And so those are two options that he's proposed. We'll get Mr. Adongo's take on that, and Dr. Makasibe take on that as well. Join me for that. The chairman of the finance committee is joining me by phone, but in the studio with me is Mr. Adongo, who of course is the member, Isaac Adongo, member of the finance committee in Parliament, as we begin to scrutinize it, because remember that this, if indeed goes back to Parliament as the president has directed, it will be the finance committee's job to do the hard work once more. But key question to ask, did the finance committee fail in its job to spot the things that the special prosecutor has spotted, which has forced the president to ask that this deal be completely be withdrawn and sent afresh? All that and more here on PM Express. Stay with me right after this. Thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. We're talking about the Agyapa issue that popped up yesterday. In the studio with me is Isaac Adongo, who is a member of the Finance Committee, joins me. And Isaac has been campaigning his constituency for a while now. How are your constituents reacting to this?
It's going well. First, let me greet everybody, including my constituents. Before I went, there were quite a number of misinformation that was going on. And after the campaign started, people are beginning to get a clearer picture of the kind of work I have been doing, both in Parliament and in the constituency. And I'm looking forward to them giving me the mandate again to serve the good people of Bolgatanga Central.
Bolgatanga Central. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Adongo, thank you for joining me. Yeah. Dr. Makasibe will join us. He had agreed to be here in person, but he says a few minutes back that he's unable to come in person, but he will join us on the phone, and so we'll have a conversation. That this is important to bring in the parliamentarians, because remember that the president had played his hand that this should go back to Parliament afresh, resubmitted, so that the process starts all over again. And so this is really within the court of Parliament very shortly, and he's the chairman of the Finance Committee, and so we'll get to hear his thoughts on this. But Mr. Adongo, a lot has happened since the Special Prosecutor's report dropped. So we've seen that report, we've seen the president's reaction to it, we've seen the finance minister's own reaction to it. The Special Prosecutor has come back and given another statement. There's this whole snowball of things. What's your reaction to what is playing out now?
Well, I think we didn't need to come to this point. The minority had reason to suspect that this transaction was fraudulent. And we were very clear from the beginning that even Parliament was not seized with the right information to take a decision on this transaction. Don't forget that what was brought to Parliament for approval was essentially the agreement between the investment fund and Agyapa. So it was just simply that Parliament was to approve the consignment of the future flows of royalties to this entity that had been registered in a tax haven. So that was the main focus. But you recall that the minority had asked questions about who are the transaction advisors, what was the scope, what were the level of due diligence, the processes that had been followed, and we were never given that information. And you notice that the Special Prosecutor is making profound pronouncements on the core issues that the minority wanted clarity on. If you take, for instance, what you just said about the president saying the doc should be brought to Parliament, the Special Prosecutor dwelt extensively on the processes leading to the appointment of the transaction advisors, and also the mandate agreement that was signed with the government of Ghana. This was never part of the request to Parliament. So you are bringing that to Parliament to do what?
Oh, so you didn't deal with the transaction advisors at all?
We never had the opportunity to deal with them.
It wasn't part of the things you considered?
Not at all. So you'll be asking us to look at what?
But it's so central. That's so central to the agreement.
Exactly. That is the reason we abstained from the transaction, because we just didn't have the right information to take the decision. And I am very happy that the Special Prosecutor zeroed in on the very fundamental issues as to who is the transaction advisor, how was he appointed, what was the nature of the agreement. And you find that the Special Prosecutor is quite clear that the mandate agreement that was signed, first, apart from the fact that it breaches the Article 1815 of the Constitution within the ambit of this being an international transaction, he also takes issues with the processes that were meant to ensure that the substance of the activities of the procurement authority itself were not undertaken. So, and that is the bottom line. And once the transaction advisor, and there's a very fundamental statement he makes that has eluded everybody. He says that the transaction advisor had been assigned certain responsibilities that basically made the people of Ghana abdicate our responsibilities.
Yeah, he says Parliament couldn't even have any oversight.
And that even the Ministry of Finance had consigned the responsibility of its entity tender committee to the transaction advisor. What it then meant was that the transaction advisor was at liberty to enter into any procurement contract on behalf of the state without going through the procurement activities and the procurement law, and without going through the mandated entity tender committee of the Ministry of Finance. It also says that the transaction advisor had become the spending officer in place of the chief director. So what it means is that this transaction advisor basically acted as though it was in charge of the Ministry of Finance, said that if they put in a request for payment, it had to be paid. You get the point? Yeah. So how on earth can you sign a contract with a transaction advisor that cedes the entire responsibility for procurement of the ministry to that entity, and that sees the management of the appropriations of the ministry, which is supposed to be within the ambit of the chief director as per the Public Financial Management Act, to such an entity? I hope you are getting the point. Yeah. So the fundamental issues beyond why you would even have an entity like that. And he makes a very important point. He says that the original request that the Ministry of Finance submitted to the Public Procurement Authority for evaluation did not include IMARA.
Well, but the finance minister has written and said that's not the case.
No. So he should prove.
He says that he lists the organizations that were part of the bidding: JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, IMARA Corporate Finance Limited, Citibank, Morgan Stanley, Barclays Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, and Rothschild and Co. You see, and then they shortlisted
there are two phases of this transaction. The first phase is that you submitted requests for proposals to these entities. So you have submitted all of this to these entities. Okay, your notice was so short that they could not respond. Are you getting the point? So if you request almost about 10 entities to respond, and you end up getting only JP Morgan, because per Martin Amidu's findings, the letter that was sent to PPA to evaluate did not include IMARA.
But when
the response of the evaluation was being submitted to the Ministry of Finance, suddenly they find IMARA and Databank appearing. That's why he said they were smuggled in. In other words, they were not even part of the people who were supposed to be evaluated. So how did they end up having a proposal at the PPA, got evaluated, and rather won the bid?
Because he starts by saying there were several unsolicited bids to be transaction advisors that came in to the finance.
Yes, but all of them are irrelevant. What is relevant is what you submit to PPA.
Yeah, but this is the finance minister's point on this. He says, with the approval of the Public Procurement Authority, dated 16 November 2017, the Ministry of Finance initiated the engagement of a transaction advisor for the transaction using the restricted tendering procurement process. It almost says that a PPA knew the process and approved that they should go ahead and look for it.
We are not understanding each other. The PPA approved a transaction that included somebody you didn't request them officially to evaluate. Are you getting the point? So we are about 5 of us interested in a transaction. You write to us. Only you probably or 2 respond. So you are supposed to evaluate those 2 and give me a report. Then when you are submitting the report, a 3rd person is included in the report. Do you get the point? And that 3rd person is Imara, whose partner is Data Bank.
Data Bank.
So they were not even qualified to be there in the first place. How did they get there? That's what he means by they were smuggled in. And now the people who were not even part of the people you had requested to evaluate, turn out to be the winners of the bid. And then you end up signing this homunculus agreement with these entities. That's why he said the transaction advisor became the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Finance became the transaction advisor. It should never happen. I don't know whether you are getting the picture.
I mean, that's what he found.
Yeah, that's what he found. So if you now say that per the approval from them, of course, they will approve what you eventually smuggled in. Okay? How did they get in? Show us your original request to PPA. And let's see Imara and Data Bank in there. They were not there. So how did they get in? In other words, the people who legitimately responded ended up having a competition with an insider. And Ken Oforiatta cannot pretend that he does. You know, Matamidi says that the Minister of Finance pretended to be following the procurement processes in form and not in substance. What does that mean? That was a shamble. Look, the work
that's why he said there's bid rigging.
Bid rigging. And you see, I have handled a number of procurement activities, particularly with World Bank activities. And I can tell you that once you don't meet the cutoff and the review committee meets, that is the end of the story. So how did you now get into the process when you did not respond? When others could no longer respond because the deadline had expired, how did you then get the opportunity to still respond when the deadline had expired and the request had already been made to procurement authority to evaluate? How did your proposal get in, Imara? Are you getting it?
Yeah.
Now, the fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves is, as a country, how did you get to a point where the Minister of Finance has his own company which is tainted everywhere there's a financial transaction? How? You recall that early in 2017...
Because Imara chose, not the Minister of Finance. A Minister of Finance says that they required that Imara had a local partner because they wanted Ghanaians involved.
You see?
And then Imara make the decision that Data Bank will be their local partner.
Let me ask you a question.
Not the Finance Minister.
The Special Prosecutor makes the point that this requirement of a local partner was smuggled in at a certain stage of the procurement process.
But I don't think it was legitimate.
He said it wasn't. He says the original request for proposal did not include a local partner.
But was intention right though?
No.
To get a Ghanaian involved.
So you see, to come from US or South Africa to come and appoint a local partner requires extensive due diligence on that local partner. Are you getting the point? So you cannot give me 2 weeks or 1 week when I'm about preparing, you then slot in a local partner, knowing that it is your local partner that is available, which is your company. And look at the companies that ended up. It was only Boulders and Data Bank. Exactly. This was Boulders which undertook an assurance project. You remember? Bank of Ghana recruited them to do an assurance job on UT Capital Bank. What happened in the end? What happened in the end was that Bank of Ghana still had to go and recruit Pricewaterhouse to do the same work for a fee because they were not competent enough and not qualified to do an assurance job.
But the Boulders report is what is the Attorney General is using for the prosecution.
They are using Pricewaterhouse reports.
Rather than Boulders. But Pricewaterhouse for Unibank and Co.
UT Bank, I am telling you that there's a Pricewaterhouse audit report.
That they use.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you getting what I'm saying?
Your chairman has joined us.
Yeah.
I want to get his quick thoughts on this. Dr. Makesibe, thank you for joining me on the phone. Hello, Dr. Makesibe.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Thank you for joining us. And so, in the studio with me is Mr. Isaac Adongo, your good friend on the committee. You have a position that the special prosecutor's work is sloppy. And you zero in on his findings on Parliament may have been not thorough in the work. But if you look at his comments on the processes that led to the selection, say, of the transaction advisors, that there were potential bid rigging, the processes didn't follow public procurement, authority laws. I mean, what's your comment on that? Didn't he at least do an analysis that alerted us to a risk of corruption that he needs commendation for?
So, as a special prosecutor, or did he say that the public procurement authority didn't do their work well? I didn't read that from him. 8 firms put in applications, and 2 were shortlisted. I think Morgan Stanley and Imara. And they were to have local partners. Morgan Stanley's local partner was Boulder, and Imara's was the data bank. That's the evidence adduced so far, and I haven't read anything to the contrary.
Yes. So Boulders, it was Imara and Morgan Stanley. The question then is the process that leads to Imara winning, and then more substantively, how then Databank, which the special prosecutor then red flags as, cronyism, bid rigging because of Databank's association with the finance minister, then pops up and then becomes a local partner for Imara.
Why you don't determine who Imara wants to be their local partner? They have decided that Databank is going to be our local partner. Did we choose Boulders for Morgan Stanley? These are firms that have done business in the Ghanaian economy for years, and they have local partners they deal with. I haven't read anything from Agyapa that suggests that there was some corrupt practice or there was something untoward in all of this transaction.
No, what he said was that there was reasonable suspicion of bid rigging in the entire process.
Did he say that? Look at the choice of words. Reasonable suspicion of. You are a special prosecutor. You have to pronounce on this definitely that yes, there was corruption, there was bid rigging, there was this. I haven't seen anything reported from the special prosecutor which says that the choice of Imara by PPA was corrupt. What he's saying, and which baffles my mind, is that Imara were paid in dollars, and to the extent that Databank is a local entity and there was no specification as to how Imara was going to reimburse Databank, then it means all of the flows to Imara were inevitably going to end up. All of these are conjectures, hypothetics. They don't go anywhere. They won't stand in any court of law. Nowhere. They won't end up anywhere. I don't know. Look at what he has put together. He's doing a disservice to the country. So you are doing a corruption risk analysis, assessment, if you like. In the end, now he's talking about who is government official one. Like, seriously. This is a corruption risk assessment on the Agyapa transaction. Read the report, and now he's talking about the EO group, what he's doing elsewhere. Then why didn't he give us an update on all the work that he's doing? I think he hasn't helped himself by putting out this horrible piece of work together.
I mean, but he says, to his defense, that this is a corruption risk assessment and not an investigation. So,
so what is the verdict? Tell me. I have read the report over. What is the verdict?
The verdict, and he makes the point there that this should be received in good faith and used to improve current and future legislative and executive actions to make corruption and corruption-related offenses very high-risk enterprises in Ghana. In fact...
So should this transaction be abandoned? Did he pronounce on that?
Well, the president had read it and has decided that, yes, abandon it and let Parliament start the process all over again.
Did the president say that?
No, when the president says start the process all over again, isn't that what it means?
Did the president say we should start the process all over again?
Yes, please.
Read where the president said the process should be started all over again.
And this is the president's statement as signed by Eugene Ahin. He says, based on the observations, the president has accordingly instructed the minister that in the interest of transparency and accountability to the Ghanaian people, the agreements supporting the transaction that were submitted to Parliament and approved by the House should be resubmitted to Parliament for the approval process to start all over again.
For the approval process to start over. Parliament doesn't work that way. Ask my colleague in your studio. When Parliament pronounces on the matter, when a motion is carried, a resolution thereof, that is the end of the matter. If a fresh application comes, then Parliament will consider it. To all intents and purposes, the Agyapa deal is a closed chapter. If the presidency or the ministry or the government for that matter intends to bring a fresh matter and improvement on whatever, then the Parliament will consider. Parliament cannot go back and say that we are going to reconsider this because the president says we should do. Maybe the presidency has intentions of resubmitting some additional information which we would consider, but I don't see this way anyway.
Okay, so you think this piece of work by the Special Prosecutor, your conclusion that have you heard you use the word sloppy and is of
my brother, have you ever heard any serious lawyer in this town say that somebody will not be prosecuted because he's a presidential candidate? Is this law? That John Mahama is governor official, but because he's a presidential candidate, I'm not touching him.
I will not interrogate him. Okay, well,
yes.
Stay with me.
Is this law? Tell me.
Stay with me. I mean, so this is your chairman's verdict on the work. He doesn't believe that this is any serious work. But to the substance of it, what he found.
You see, first we need to put this in focus. This is not a corruption investigation.
Yeah.
This is a due diligence of a corruption-related risk matter. So you are looking at the transaction and pointing out whether the way it is structured, it could give rise to corruption. And you want him to say what? That somebody has engaged in corruption? I mean, how can you expect Marty Amidu to make a pronouncement that somebody has committed corruption when all he did was a due diligence work? Just like you do financial due diligence, you do corporate governance due diligence, you do valuation due diligence, you do money laundering and what do you call it? Terrorism financing risk due diligence. We also do due diligence on the risk of corruption. So that is what Martin Amidu did. So for anybody to think that Martin Amidu, for a transaction that has not even fully consummated, where will he go and catch the corrupt person? But be it as it may, you can choose to read what you want to read and leave out what you don't want to read. But let me read portions of Martin Amidu's own work. He says that the manipulation of the request for proposals and the request for proposals is the invitation to people to tender, which specifies the scope of work, what assignment you are going to do, the technical competencies that are expected, and what makes you qualified to become a transaction advisor. So he says that the manipulation, and I don't know what manipulation, if you hear the word manipulation, and you still say that you haven't heard anything that suggests that the procurement process was not duly followed. I don't know what you are hearing. He said the manipulation of the request for proposals in a manner inconsistent with the PPA approval. And you are saying the man did not pronounce on the quality of work of the PPA? Inconsistent with the PPA approval to enable Imara Corporate Finance Limited of South Africa to win the bid with Data Bank Financial Services and the individual interests of the Minister of Finance and Felicia Ashley with administrative responsibility for procurement in the ministry, who came along with the minister from Data Bank to the Ministry of Finance in 2017, turned what would have otherwise been an objective search for an independent transaction advisor into an opaque bed-raiding exercise. And you said he didn't pronounce on the quality of procurement processes. Anybody who reads this should be very worried, especially coming on the back of a PPA director himself who has just been interdicted and sacked for things that are very similar to what Mate Amidu is saying. Or you didn't read that one? I'm even surprised that the president is talking about this thing being brought back. If you can sack a PPA boss for being found culpable and violating laws, the finance minister has a much higher responsibility. But
as you made, this is not an investigation.
No, but he has said that the Constitution, let me read. There's another portion where he talks about the Constitution. And when you violate the Constitution, it is enough for you to be sacked. What is the most sacrosanct law in this country?
Remember that the Special Prosecutor actually recommends that this could be a basis for investigation. So until that is done, you cannot act as you suggested.
You see.
In that same report you read, he makes the point. He recommends that the president can actually use that to trigger a proper investigation.
Let me tell you, it's a recommendation and instruction. Recommendations.
It's not.
Are they instructions?
It's not.
So why are you relying on somebody's recommendations?
I mean, it is his recommendation.
Rely on your own standard of fairness. Your standard of fairness is that you just dealt a blow to somebody who can go to court and challenge charge.
Based on the outcome of an investigation.
And I'm saying that.
And the investigation recommended that sack him. No, and he did.
No, and I'm saying.
Charge.
No, I'm saying.
So the two are different.
No, you don't need a recommendation to take a definitive decision. And recommendations are not instructions. Okay? If I have a report before you, and the report is so bizarre, that I fell short of asking you to fire your finance minister, and you are aware that your standard of fairness requires that once you fired somebody from the other side, somebody with a higher responsibility ought to go. And that has to be the Minister for Finance.
What crime has he committed?
Because he has engaged in activities that Martin Amidu describes as bid rigging.
Potential, reasonable suspicion.
No.
Qualified.
Listen, he says it ended up being an opaque. That process is gone already.
Yeah.
That process of recruiting the independent transactional advisor has already passed. The independent transactional advisor has already received money. And Martin Amidu describes that agreement, the mandate agreement, as being null and void because it is in violation of the Public Financial Management Act. Okay, so if you have actually paid money in relation to what has been pronounced as null and void ab initio, you have willfully caused financial loss to the state.
In fact, let me put that to your chairman because it's one that had come up also. Dr. Makasibebwa, so the Special Prosecutor reveals that the transaction advisor was paid $15,000 a month. And he also mentions a lump sum success fee of $4 million. Considering that now the president says, well, let's begin this whole thing afresh from all over again. Some suggest, as we just heard, that clearly is money gone down the drain and it must count as financial loss.
Yeah, that's why earlier I asked whether the president indeed said that the whole process should start all over.
And I read I used the word.
Those were that would be your interpretation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I read quotes and should be resubmitted to Parliament for the approval process to start all over again.
I spoke to you earlier. I said that doesn't happen in Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, but that's not. Yeah, are you talking to me or to the president? I'm just quoting to you what the president said.
And in the same report, did Martin Amidu say that the process of selecting the transaction advisor was fraudulent, for which reason money paid to him should be retrieved? Nobody has he stated. He doesn't really have the power. Martin Amidu doesn't have the power to pronounce on that. It's only a court that can do what Martin Amidu say that the transaction advisors were not procured in the right manner, and for which reason money should be refunded. He doesn't have the power to pronounce on that.
But Mr. Asibe, that's not my question. My question is, seeing that the president says, submit, resubmit, start the process all over, which means that the first process, that we paid $15,000 a month, $4 million, all that process is going to restart. I mean, we've already made payments. Taxpayers' money has already gone. Shouldn't that count as financial loss?
I don't know, but how would that be financial? If there's a proper agreement that underpins the recruitment of the transaction advisor, if it is your wish to go start the process all over, why would that proper agreement be nullified? I don't think that's the position of the law. In any event, let me ask you, is John Mahama government official one in the airbag scandal?
Well, the Special Prosecutor says...
That's what Martin Abidi says.
That's what it says in the document.
So President Mahama is the governor official one in the airbag scandal, according to the gospel of Martin Abidi. Is that not the case?
Yeah.
So, Honorable Adongo, former president,
yes.
Honorable Adongo, the former president, is the one who conspired with his brother Samuel Mahama to steal $5 million from the airbag scandal, according to Martin Hamid. He's not prosecuting him because he's a presidential candidate. And I am on phone. I don't have the documents before me, and I would have also read verbatim the words of Martin Hamidou concerning John Mahama. John Mahama is out today denying that he's governor official one in the transaction. You are saying Kenufreata should resign as minister. What business does John Mahama have running as president if, according to Martin Hamidou, he's government official one, the criminal suspect in the airbag scandal? What business does he have coming to us for us to vote for him again as president? If, according to Martin Hamidou, who has pronounced that there was bid rigging, I say the man should not be taken seriously. He has done a sloppy job, and for me, reading through what he has put out, I will not waste my time on Martin Hamidou and his epistles or whatever he's put out there.
Yeah, stay with me, Mr. Marcus Weba. That is a valid point, is it not? But Hamidou, this same document says John Mahama is government official one. If you believe everything he said, you must believe that too.
So is that why I'm here?
No, I mean, but he's asking a direct question.
You see,
I guess it's making a logical point.
Listen, he says that there is a valid agreement. He is the chairman of the finance committee. Within the proper interpretation of Article 1815, is Imara a local company? And can the government of Ghana enter into a transaction with an international business without parliamentary approval? And did he see any request to him to approve any such transaction? So how can you now be calling such an agreement, a mandate agreement with a foreign company that violates the constitution, as a very good agreement, for which reason monies that have been paid have been legitimately paid? That one too, you want us to go to court?
Yeah, but yes,
and that is usurping his powers.
Powers of the chairman?
Of Parliament.
Okay.
Usurping the powers of Parliament to approve international transactions. And that was violated. And it has been clearly stated in Martin Hamidou's work. You still say the payment to the transaction advisor is correct. Martin Hamidou says that the transaction advisor was given the powers of the chief director of the ministry. And you still say that per good corporate governance and for what the Public Financial Management Act is envisaging, this is appropriate. That they can actually recruit anybody and give any contract to anybody without recourse to the entity tender board of the Ministry of Finance. And you still say that is a legitimate contract? I'm surprised. But you see, people may not understand why this whole concept of a transaction advisor is at the core of the fraudulent intentions. And let me explain to you why. The transaction advisor is the one who values the transaction and had cause to tell you, and that's why I have a document here. If you look at similar companies that are trading, similar royalty companies, okay, across the world, they are trading today at a price multiple of 1.5. What that means is that if you look at the price of the shares of those companies on the stock exchange, and you relate that to the net asset values of those companies, it works up to 1.5. The price is about 50% more. Are you getting the point? Now, what that means, if you have 3 billion as the flows, assuming that this company is not going to make any money from any investment, but all the monies it receives as its assets is the royalties we give to it. And those royalties over a 15-year period is estimated at 3 billion. You multiply 3 billion by 1.5. You get $4.5 billion. That is the true value of Agyapa Royalties. How they arrive at 1 billion, given that Data Bank and Co. are the transaction advisors who valued our 4.5 billion asset at 1 billion. Are you not worried? The second one is that this same transaction advisor will be an underwriter of the transaction. What it means is that he would undertake to take the entire transaction if the market does not buy it. So, assuming that they take the entire transaction and pay you $1 billion, the next day on the secondary market, they go to trade it for $4.5 billion. They make a cut of $3.5 billion. And you are saying, and this is what Mati Amidu is saying, that all these manipulations is meant for Data Bank and Imara to be in a position where they will undervalue our asset as they have done and will profit from it in the end. And so you are now, that's why they have gone to value something that is worth 4.5 billion. They valued it for 1 billion. And you know that in IPO, depending on how you market it, people may not even come. So they take it. Nobody has responded. They take the entire IPO of 1 billion. The next day it is traded on the secondary market. And immediately they go on the secondary market. The market realizes that this transaction is actually worth more than what you are selling. They come to give you 4.5 billion when you have just spent 1 billion. And you make a profit of 3.5 billion overnight. And you say that the Minister of Finance did not know the true intentions of what he was doing.
I want to take a break, but just before I do, the question that...
And I can leave this with you. You can share it with people.
The question that your chairman asked is a logical question. I want you to address it.
It is not the reason
that if you... I know, but it's a valid question.
If you look at the documents I'm having here, it is not about government official
because you believe the work that he's done.
Listen.
Then you must believe everything else in the document, including that.
Listen to me. Martin Amidu has made a pronouncement on His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. John Dramani Mahama has a position on that matter, and he's made it very clear. The Minister for Finance has also responded to Martin Amidu's queries. The only challenge is that he talks about the processes they followed. But Martin Amidu is saying that those processes that you said you followed were manipulated and gave you specific examples of how you manipulated them.
You don't believe the finance, but you believe the Special Prosecutor.
No, I am analyzing this one.
Okay.
Because I have the data before me. And I'm saying that you are indicating that you engage people and you did restricted tendering and all of that. You have listed company. Martin Amidu says, when you send a letter to PPA, even though these were the people you send the request for proposal, when you were sending the letter to PPA to evaluate the bids that you have got, Imara wasn't there. Is that true? So show that the letter was, this is the letter I sent to PPA, dated so and so and reference so and so, which will conform to Martin Amidu's letter that he has. And in that letter, indeed, Imara was there. You don't just come and write English. Do you get the point? So each of the things that you are listing here, I expect you to take. Martin Amidu says that your original request for proposal did not include the requirement of a local partner. So you're expecting that would have been... You should now show that it is not true because my original proposal included it. Do you get the point? Martin Amidu says that the notice that you gave was so short that even other bidders were not able... Let me quote exactly what Martin Amidu said about the short notice.
And Martin Amidu has clarified tonight that the specific details, that's in the entire voluminous 64-page document, was not available to the President and the Finance Minister until the 1st of November, which is just 2 days away. And so it's very possible that he may not have seen this particular part.
So what was he responding to?
So he was
responding to an executive summary.
Martin Amidu says what he gave them on 2 weeks ago, on the 16th of October, was conclusions and observations.
And he responded to that?
So that's what he used.
I'm asking you, and the Minister of Finance responded to conclusions and observations without seeing what informed the conclusions?
Because the President asked him to respond to the
observations. And I am saying that if there was an investigation on you in this place, and they submitted to you conclusions
and
observations, and you have not seen the exact information that backs the conclusion, you respond?
Well, if that's what I have at
Least
the time.
of all, a finance minister.
I mean, it doesn't bar me from responding to the full document later.
So when you respond, don't come back and say that you responded with full information.
But I don't think he said that.
Because you are now saying that. So I'm saying that don't say that for him, because that would be the height of negligence and
irresponsibility.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, because this process hasn't ended. I'm pretty sure that this
and I'm saying that it doesn't make sense that he would have responded in several pages without having seen the exact write-up that led to the conclusions.
Okay.
So I am saying that Martin Amidu is very clear. You see, he said the request for proposal in the form it was made. In the form it was made. In what form? He has explained that. He explained that the request for proposal originally did not include the requirement for a local partner.
Okay.
Now he said that with a short return date, which made it possible to bring on board data bank with Imara. So once everybody was struggling to find out which is the best entity that I can work with.
But Morgan Stanley managed to also put in a bid at the end.
They put in a bid.
I mean, the two of them. Yes.
No, Imara didn't put in a bid. I have explained to you.
Yeah, you have.
The man is saying they didn't put in a bid.
But
they sent in a bid through the back door.
So that is the special prosecutor against the finance minister.
And they sent it through the back door. You get it? I sent you a request to evaluate proposals for me.
Yeah. Okay.
And I list companies that I have proposals from. You submit to me your evaluation report.
I get what you're saying.
And I see a strange company.
Yeah.
And it is the Minister of Finance who signs the approval of the evaluation report. So he couldn't have said that he's not aware that his request to PPA is not the exact evaluation that was done. Yeah, so there is a ghost company there. So which ghost company you know it because that's your company?
My only point is that now there are two versions. The finance minister's version, which contradicts substantively part of the Special Prosecutor.
It doesn't.
The Special Prosecutor maintaining, which is what you have repeated.
If I read this, if I read, let me.
Isn't that why possibly some suggest that there is a need for further investigations?
Listen.
Before real conclusions can be made.
Let me say this. I have already explained to you that the fundamental scheme for robbing the state of its gold royalties is the work of the transaction advisor. And once you are able to cook the transaction advisor and put that transaction advisor in your pocket, we won't even get the right value for our assets. He will undervalue the asset, okay? The underwriting process, they will not properly market this transaction. In the end, the transaction will flop on the stock exchange at IPO. The underwriter, who is the transaction advisor and data bank, will acquire all these shares. Okay? The next day, just the next day, they will be trading it on the secondary market.
That is hypothetical.
It is not hypothetical. That is the process.
That's the process. Okay, so I want to bring in your chairman because there's a process that has to do with the committee's work. Dr. Mark Asibeyeboa, I want to read a portion of the Special Prosecutor's findings to you. It says the fact that the Committee on Finance of Parliament, through all the rules of proper scrutiny of the transaction documents to the wind, for purposes of expediency, appears to have been captured on page 10 of its report, when it stated, and they quote what you said, the Committee of Finance was clearly in indecent haste to rubber stamp the transaction document to meet the rescheduled implementation timeline of the first week of September 2020 put forward by the Ministry of Finance and MIIT without taking into account the preamble injunction of the 1992 Constitution for justice, probity, and accountability in its deliberations. What do you make of this assertion?
To suggest that the Finance Committee has powers to approve transactions, then I must be a very powerful chairman. Every business done at committee ends up on the at plenary. That's how Parliament works. No committee has powers to approve anything. So documents, agreements are referred to committee, and when you finish, you submit your report to the plenary. If you are taking a stand, I'm saying that for you to pronounce on the work of the Finance Committee, in the minimum, you should have even spoken to the chairman of the committee to get a feel of how we went about all of this. and Matiami, who professes that he does a good job and he puts out this sloppy report, didn't speak to me, chairman of the committee. This whole business started in 2018 when Parliament passed the Minerals Income Investment Fund Act. In the Act, it was specified clearly that the MIF had authority to set up SPVs. When the Act was passed in 2018, in 2019, finance ventured into the market. Then they hit roadblocks because the law didn't suit the London Stock Exchange where this was going to be listed. And Honorable Adongo spews out a lot of things. You think listing an entity on the London Stock Exchange is like doing business around here? There's scrutiny over there to list a business on the London Stock Exchange. He doesn't understand this. He comes and he throws these things about us to something on top of this happening. So they went back and forth, back and forth. They came back to Parliament to amend the Minerals Income Investment Fund Act. All of these are committee. Nobody raised any matter, any issue. For the better part of 2 years, the Act, the Amendment Act, it came back and forth. The last bit was those agreements that came to Parliament. So in all of this, the AG back and forth, you saw letters from AG to Finance, which were advised that you can't do this. You go back and forth. Nobody raised any question in all of this. And all of us on the committee worked on the Act, the Amendment Act, until the last agreements came. And then suddenly, in an election year, some people felt that, no, we're not going to support this. Well, we granted them that. And so for the Matiami suggests that the committee works with indecent haste. If he had taken his time and understood the processes that led to the listing, the creation of the SPV, Agyapa Royalties, the subsequent listing on the London Stock Exchange, he doesn't understand the transaction. I don't blame him. Speak to me in the minimum. Speak to the chairman. You are scrutinizing the work of the Finance Committee. Speak to your chairman. Speak to members. Get them on record. And you want us to take this as a good piece of work. And I go back to the sacrosanct nature of Matiamidu's work. And then now, my colleague Honorable Adongo says that, no, he didn't come to your studio to speak about John Mahama. In doing the corruption risk assessment, was it Matiamidu's business to be pronouncing on the EU group and John Dramani Mahama? For starters, was it his business? If you are doing a corruption risk assessment on the Agyapa Royalties, why do you throw in this? And now he throws in this and they are saying that, oh, as for me, this is not why I came here. So, for me, I don't pay any serious attention to what he does. Because if he understands the processes, how committees in Parliament work, and then how the whole plenary scrutinizes this. I've done this business for almost 4 years. The Finance Committee has rejected proposals from the government. And I talk about Mary. It was the Finance Committee that says, government, take this back. We are not going to approve this. Even just this weekend, and Honorable Adongo was with me in Koforika, just this weekend, there was a proposal to review allowances to foreign travel to go. We said, no, that's not our business. Take it back. We do it every time. Yeah. So it's not as if somebody is hiding something or somebody is protecting anybody. For me, if you really wanted to do a proper corruption risk assessment, your first point of call was the committee that passed
should have reached out to you. I mean, for all that.
I think he's done a big disservice to the people of this country.
In the interest of time, do we have some 30 seconds? What's your final thoughts on this? What should happen now?
I'm very surprised that my colleague says that because it's in an election year, we decided to go against it.
We have a few.
We have had several approvals on consensus, even in the election year. And as we speak, even today, we are approving transactions on consensus. The issue of debate and the issue of contention is not about the legal framework of the MIT and all of that. It's about the Agyapa Royalties deal, which the minority were very clear that there were issues, and you refused, and you went with a majority decision. A majority decision means that you will do it whether or not we support it. Quickly,
what should happen now? Do you agree with the president that he should come back, start all over again?
He has to sack the Minister for Finance. That's the most important thing. He shouldn't be playing around.
Okay. That's it for PM Express tonight. I can bet you we haven't had the last of this. Enjoy the rest of your evening.